Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Whales 101. Meet the planet's largest marine mammals. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader, Andrea Adame. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for being here with us today. Take it away, Andrea.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. I am very happy to be here today, and I would like to tell you about the love of my life, which is whales. So, my name, as Rob said, is Andrea Adame, and I am from Mexico. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about myself just so to get to know me a little bit. I am a scuba diving instructor and a biologist. I have been scuba diving basically my whole life since I was a little child. Then I went to do my biology degree, and after that, I started working in scuba diving. I moved to Baja, to La Paz in Baja California Sur, and at the beginning in 2016, I was mostly doing scuba diving. But then I realized that the water gets very cold in the winter and spring, so I started looking for other things. And that's when I started working with whales in Magdalena Bay and San Ignacio. And in 2020, I became a naturalist for NatHab, and that's how I'm here. Now that's enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about whales. So when you hear the word whale, you might think about many different things. We have big whales, we have small whales, we have a whale with a lot of teeth, we have whale with not any teeth. So there are many, many different whales that we have in the world. And we as humans, we like to organize things in neat little boxes. And those boxes, in biology, we call them taxa. So, taxonomy is the study of naming, defining, and classifying groups of biological organisms based on shared characteristics. So, that's what we did with whales. Now, before we go into the modern whales, I would like to tell you a little bit about whale evolution. So archaeocets are a group of extinct early cetaceans. Now, if you look at my picture here at the slide, you will see all of these beautiful, strange-looking animals, and these are all early cetaceans. So the first one that we have there, that is called a Pachycetus. And you might wonder, what is that? That does not look like a cetacean. How do we know that's like the first organism that we decided was going to be a cetacean? So it's actually some characteristics that are not very easy to see. The first one is that they have really dense bones. These bones kind of work like weight. So when they were close to the shore and close to reef areas, they were able to more easily catch prey that were close to the water. And another big one, which is the most important one, is that they have characteristics in their inner ear that are only found in mother cetaceans. So if you look at the animals that we have here in front of us, those are 5 families of the early cetaceans. We have the Pachycetus, which is called that because they found the fossils in Pakistan. Then we have the Ambulicetus. Then we have the Rementicetus. Then the Protocetidae, and finally the Basilosaurus. Now, this first cetacean is estimated to be around 50 million years old, and they are kind of the amphibious stages in cetacean evolution. Now, the first ones were a lot more coastal. They were still tied to land. They had to have their babies on land, and they were more like living in the shore. And as we progress on their evolution, the last ones, like the Protocetidae and the Basilosaurus, they were obligatory aquatic. All right, so cetaceans, the modern cetaceans are in a group called Neocetus. Now, the word cetacean comes from cetus cetus. So the word cetus means large sea creature in Latin, and cetus is sea monster. So the characteristics of cetaceans are that they are fully aquatic in their lifestyle. They have a streamlined body shape that allows them to swim and move through water a lot faster. They have a carnivorous diet, and also there are around 89 or 90 living species. Now, this number is kind of around because depending on what scientist you read or what article you are getting your information from, it can change a little bit. So yeah. Now, if you look at the pictures that I have here on the slide, you will see on the top left a beautiful bowhead, and then on the right top we have a humpback whale, and then on the pictures below we have a false killer whale and we have a river dolphin. So if you look at these pictures, there's one very big difference between all of these animals, and that is what they have in their mouths. So the pictures above we have baleen, and the pictures below we have teeth. So we decided to make our lives easier, and we separated modern cetaceans in two big groups. So on one hand, we have Mysticeti, which are baleen whale, and on the other hand, we have Odontoceti, which are toothed whales. Now, Mysticeti, it's also another Latin word. Moscheto is the Latin word for mustache. So basically, the Greek decided to call baleen whale mustache whales. And then Odontoceti is also another Greek word. Odonto, like odontologist, is tooth. So we have toothed whales. So baleen whale have bristles that are made out of keratin, and they use that to filter plankton. And they are the smallest group. They only have around 16 species separated in 4 families, which we will talk about in a little bit. And then we have Odontoceti. So those are the toothed whales. They are more abundant and a lot more diverse. We have 73 species around, and they are divided in 6 superfamilies. Now, another big difference between these two groups is that the baleen whale, they have 2 blowholes, and the toothed whales, they only have 1 blowhole. Okay, so Odontoceti. Now we're going to go a little bit into taxonomy. I'm going to tell you a little about all of the different groups and show you a little bit of them. So Odontoceti has 6 superfamilies. They are super diverse, super different depending on the ecosystem that they live, the food that they eat, the depth where they hunt. So all of these kind of made them evolve in different directions. So the first group we're going to talk about is Delphinoidea. So this one is the most well-known group, is where you have the most common dolphins that you think when they tell you the word dolphin. So these 3 families are super cool. The first one is Delphinidae. So in Delphinidae, we have like the most common dolphins that we see. The bottlenose, we have orcas, we have common dolphins. So they are divided in 5 subfamilies, and they are all carnivorous. They have lots and lots of teeth because they hunt. They are hunters. They go for fish, for squid, and the bigger ones like orcas will also go for big mammals like whales and sea lions and dolphins and many other different species. These are the most well known, and this is where we have the most information, the more information of them. Then the second group is one very cool one. We have Monodontidae. Now, if we go back to the Greek words, odonto means tooth, and then mono, it's just one. So this group is very small. It only contains narwhals and belugas, and both of them don't have that many teeth. They only have a few of them. So the narwhal, the tusk or the horn that you see on it, that is not a horn. That is just one of their very few teeth. And they use that horn to whack the fish, and then they eat it. And for the belugas, they actually only have a very few teeth, and they don't use them that much. The way that they hunt is mostly by suction feeding. So they will kind of get close to the prey that they are trying to get and just like suction them in. And then we have the next group, which are the porpoises, the Phoconidae. They are very distinguishable because they have very small conical flat teeth, and also they have very rounded shapes, and they are in the smallest of the cetaceans. One of the most popular or the most famous porpoises is the vaquita. If you have heard of it, is one that we have here in the high Gulf of California, and sadly it's about to go extinct. If you look at the picture on the top right, you will see the vaquita is the one that has black and white. It's a very beautiful animal, but sadly they are almost gone. All right, so these are the 3 mega families of Delphinidae. Now we're gonna go with the second one. This is Physotheridae. So this one contains all of the sperm whales. Now you might think that there's only one sperm whale, which is the one we know the most about, the largest of the toothed whales. They can go all the way up to 18 meters. And if you notice in the picture of the right, you'll see that they only have teeth on the lower jaw, which is really, really interesting interesting. They use it to hunt the giant squid. So we actually have 3 species of sperm whales. The most well-known is the normal one, the sperm whale, but we also have a pygmy sperm whale and a dwarf sperm whale. Now, these 2 groups are actually very mysterious. We don't have that much information on them. They are very rarely seen. They spend most of their times in very deep water, and they are small. So it's difficult to do a lot of research on them. Many of the groups that we'll be talking about, all of the research or all of the information that we have is mostly from dead animals that we find on the beaches, and then you do an autopsy and you can get a little bit of information. But these 3 species are very similar in their anatomy and in their the way of life. It's just that we don't see that much of the pygmy and the dwarf sperm whales. All right. Our 3rd group is also another very mysterious one. It's called Siphoidea. We have here the beaked whales. So if you look at the pictures here, they also don't have that many teeth. They only have a few. The males have 2 tusks that you can see here on the pictures on the right, and the female don't have any. Now, these are the also very deep divers. They can go all the way down to 1,000 meters deep. And they spend most of the time, most of their lives in these very, very deep waters. So a lot of the information that we do know just comes from the animals that we find dead on the beaches. All right, next up, we have these 3 little ones. It's called Lipotoide, Platanistide, and Inidae. This is like a mega group that encompasses all of the river dolphins. In my opinion, river dolphins are a little bit ugly, let's say. They have evolved from a long time ago when the ocean levels were higher. They would go into the mangroves and into the mainland, and then as the water level came down again, they kind of got stuck. So they evolved in a very different ecosystem than all of the other cetaceans that we have been talking about. So they look kind of strange. So if you look here, we have these 3 families. They are separated because they are from very different places. We have Lipotoide, which comes from China. They are all extinct now, sadly. It's one of the newer extinctions. Then we have Platanistide. They are in India, Nepal, and Pakistan. And then we have Inidae. They are in South America. So these are all freshwater dolphins. One of the characteristics that you will see in them is that their dorsal fin became very small. And it became small because they are swimming through thick vegetation. And if they had a big dorsal like other species, they would just be getting stuck all the time. So their dorsals became very small and the pectoral became quite large. So the pectoral fin actually allows them to maneuver very well in these areas that have a lot of vegetation. Another thing that happened with them is that their eyes became very small, really, really, really tiny, because they are in rivers and areas that have very poor visibility. So they weren't using their eyesight anymore. So you will see that their eyes are small and tiny. And some of the species have become blind already. So yeah, they are I would say the ugliest of all dolphins. They are pretty, but they are strange animals. All right. Next, we have Mysticeti. So Mysticeti are the baleen whales. Baleen whales use their baleen to filter plankton. So we have 4 groups here. They include the largest animal that has ever existed in the planet, which is the blue whale. And then, of course, we have the humpbacks, we have the gray whales, we have lots of different types of whales that we'll talk about also. So the first group is the best known, is Balaenopterae. It's also called rorquals. So here we have the humpbacks, we have the blue whales, we have the fin whales, we have the sei whale. So we have these whales that do mostly gulp feeding. So one of the characteristics that defines this group is the pleats that you see on their stomach. So these pleats go all the way from the chin down to their belly button. And when they are feeding, they can expand, and that way they can gulp large quantities of water. And then they just sift through all of that water and plankton. All of the plankton gets stuck behind their teeth, and then they use their tongue kind of to swallow that back. Now, they have lots of different techniques that they use depending on where they are, because these groups, some of them are in the Arctic, some of them are in the Antarctic, and some of them move all around. So some of them do the lounge feeding, but they have also been doing, like the humpbacks do the bubble net. they also do the flick feeding, which is when they hit the surface of the water with their fluke, and that way they kind of knock the krill out, and then they just scoop it with their mouths, which makes it easier for them. We also have trap feeding, which is when they kind of just open their mouths, and with their pectoral fin, they kind of move the plankton around. So that way they are getting all of the plankton in their mouth. And once it's full, they just close it and swallow. So they have developed different techniques that they use to feed, which is really, really cool. All right, after that one, we have Balenidae. So in Balenidae, we have two groups. We have the Eubalena, which is the right whales, and then we have the Balena, which is the bowhead whales. So for these groups, they use mostly what we call skim feeding. So these whales are characterized because they have a very large head, a lot larger than all of the rorquals, and also they have very robust bodies because these whales spend most of the times in the very, 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 very cold waters up in the Arctic or in the Antarctic. Now, this shape of their head allows them to have very, very long baleen. The baleen is only on the side, so right in the middle, kind of their two front teeth, let's say, they don't have any baleen. So what they do is basically they just swim with their mouths slightly open, so that allows for water to come in right through the middle, and all of the plankton gets stuck in the long baleen on the sides. So they do skim feeding. Another interesting thing about these whales is that they are very long-lived. They can live all the way up to 200 years. Some whales that we have found recently still have harpoons from the whaling days. So these are very long-lived animals. And another thing is that they are positively buoyant. That means that if they are not doing any effort, they will just be kind of floating in the surface. So that made it very easy for whalers to go for them, because once they kill them, they would just stay on the surface and they would be able to harvest the oil and the baleen and all of these things. So that's why we call them the right whales, because on the whaling days, they were the right whales to catch. All right. Next up, we have Cetotheridae. Now, this is an interesting group because depending on who you read, they are or they are not as a group of the Mysticeti whales. But for this presentation, we will have them be their own group. They are very mysterious whale. There's only one species, which is the pygmy right whale. It's very rare. There's less than 20 sightings out in the open ocean of this whale. And they are the smallest of all of the baleen. If you look at the picture on the left, that is one of the few individuals that have been able to be researched. They are very, very, very tiny animals. And not a lot, we don't know a lot about them. So that's interesting. I really enjoy that there's still so much that we are learning, and there's still so many things that we can learn from the ocean. All right. And next up, we have Scrictidae, which are the gray whales. They also only have one species on this group, and they are my favorite. They are the stars of the Great Whales of Baja NatHab trip, and they are an amazing and incredible animal. So we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about this wonderful species. Okay, so my favorite, my babies. So their distribution, if you look at the map here, you will see that they go up into the Alaska and Russia Sea up in the north, and they go all the way down. In the West Pacific, they go down to Baja, and in the East Pacific, they go all the way down to the China Sea. Now, we have two populations or two groups that live in the ocean nowadays. The one in the American Pacific is the most abundant. That's where we find most of the whales. But in the Russia and China Sea, there's a small group of around 400 animals that live there year round. It's estimated that there are around 15,000 gray whales in the world. There actually used to be an Atlantic population, but sadly that one disappeared with the whaling industry in the late 1800s. Now, gray whales, if you know a little bit about them, they are known because they have the longest migration of all mammals. Every year, they come down from Alaska all the way down to Baja, Mexico. That is around 5,000 miles that they travel in around 2 months. Then they spend their winter and spring here in Mexico, and then they go back up all the way up to Alaska and the Chukchi Sea. So every single year they travel 10,000 miles, which makes them the longest migrators in the world. Now, when they come down here to Mexico, there's three main locations where we find them. We have Guerrero Negro, which is the lagoon in the north of the peninsula. We have San Ignacio, which is the lagoon in the middle of the peninsula and also the smallest lagoon. And finally, we have Magdalena Bay, which is the largest bay and is the one more in the south. My favorite is San Ignacio. That's where we have our NatHab trip. It's a very special one because it's the most remote. So there is the least amount of people there. And also the opening between the open ocean, the Pacific, and the lagoon is very narrow. So that means that if you are in the right spot at the right time, you can see all of the whales coming through because it's a very small opening. All right, so why are they migrating? If you look at the map here, when the whales are up in Alaska and the Chukchi Sea, those are their summer grounds. That's where they are feeding. Now, gray whales are super interesting because unlike the rorquals or the right whales and the bowheads, they have a different technique that they use. We call them bottom feeders. So what they do is they go down to the bottom of the ocean and they will grab a scoop full of mud, and in that mud, there's a lot of little crustaceans and amphipods and copepods. And they will grab all of those that live in the mud and they sift through all of the mud. And then they'll just keep the little animals, the little plankton in their mouth and use their tongue to swallow it. So that's the area where they are feeding. After they feed in the summer, they'll travel all the way down to Mexico. Well, before we go that, I'll show you a video of how they eat. It's very interesting here. Okay. Let me see. So if you look at the picture here, you can see there is a gray whale. She's on the bottom of the seafloor, and you can see how she opens her mouth and she's just grabbing mouthfuls. Now this is a juvenile, so she's also playing and rolling around a little bit. Another interesting thing that we see with these whales is that they prefer to use either one side or the other when they are grabbing the mud from the bottom. So if it's a right-sided whale, the baleen, I mean the barnacles on the right side will get scraped off by the mud, so they'll have a clean side. Now, if they are left eaters, the left side will have no barnacles, so we know if they are lefties or righties. Another thing that you might be able to see here on the video is that they have a couple of those ventral pleats. So this tells us a little bit about the early separation of the gray whale from the other rorquals, because they do have some pleats, but they specialized in a different type of feeding so that they didn't develop the pleats as much as the rorquals did. Okay. Now, we were talking about their greatest migration. So they spend the summer months up in, oops, there. They spend their, oh, 1 second, there. They spend their summer months up in Alaska and Russia feeding, and then they come down to Baja, and they come here for two very important reasons. The first one is for making babies, and the second one is for having babies. So they come here to make their babies and to have their babies. The gestational period is around 11 months. So that means that they get pregnant when they are down here in Mexico. They go up to Alaska to feed and to get fat during the summer, and then they come back down here to have their babies. Why do they come down here to have their babies? Because when baby whales are born, they don't have a lot of blubber. So they would have a difficult time surviving in the very cold water. So yeah. Now, another interesting thing, if you decide to come into the Great Whales of Baja trip, you will be able to maybe see the mothers and the calves. Or if you're very lucky, you can also see the very mythical creature. We call it the pink Floyd, which is the whale penis. Now, whale penises are super interesting. They have fibroelastic fibers that allow them to move in a different way than most other mammals. So that makes it easier for them to find the right place where it should go. So here I'm gonna show you a picture, a video of a mother and a calf in San Ignacio. Now, with the gray whales at the beginning of the season, so when they start to arrive in the beginning of February, you'll have very young baby whales. And the mothers are a little bit more protective and they kind of stay farther away. But as the season goes on and the babies get older, the calves get older, they start to get curious, the mom starts to get tired. So they start to come very close to the boats. Now in San Ignacio, we use a type panga boat. So when we are in the whale watching area and a whale decides to approach, we turn the engine, we put the engine in neutral. We don't turn it off because that's how they see us. They can hear very well, so that's how they are seeing us. But we put the engine in neutral and then we allow them to do whatever they want. So here you will see a very beautiful example of a mother and a calf approaching one of our boats. And the baby. So the one you are looking at here, this is the mother. You can see all of the barnacles on her head. And then right on top of her, we have the baby or the calf. And you can see behind, there's a lot of whales. In San Ignacio, we are very lucky. We just see whales everywhere. The baby whales are, as they get older, they start to get very curious. They are, just imagine, like a little mammal. So they are curious about the world. They are playful. They are very tactile. So they stay close to mom all the time. But sometimes they will come up to the boat and also ask for some attention from the people on the boat. So it's a very unique experience that you get here in San Ignacio. Okay, so before that, wait one second, here. So another interesting thing about the gray whales is that they are promiscuous. That means that the female and the mate will be mating all of the time when they are down here in Baja, many, many times. So the mother will never know who the father is. The baby will never know who the father is. What happens here is it's more like a sperm race. So the sperm, once it goes into the female whale, it doesn't reach the egg very fast. It's kind of a race. So it takes a while for the sperm to go all the way up. So the best sperm is the one that is gonna win the race. And it can happen all through the migration. So in the path going down from Alaska to Baja, and then it also happens inside of the lagoons. Now the females go into estrus 3 weeks. So one of the estrus is in November and December, and then if they didn't get pregnant on that first one, they will have a second estrus, which is already inside of the lagoons, and that will give them the highest chance of having a baby and being successful in their reproductive cycle. Now, the gestational period, as I was saying, is between 12 and 13 months. So they will be having their baby once they come back down to Mexico, which is always on the same time. So they start to arrive late January, and then the last ones to leave are at the end of April. So most of the baby whales are born around January 10, but the whales don't like to read the books or the presentations. So there's always interesting ones that kind of are out of the schedule. And unlike dolphins or like Odontoceti, the baleen whale, they only have around 6 to 7 months of time with their mothers. So the mother will be here in Mexico and it will be nursing for a couple of months, and then it will travel up north to the Chukchi Sea. It will fight orcas and it will fight boats and it will get all the way up there. And once they reach Alaska again, it will show it how to feed. And after that, they go their own ways. So that is an interesting thing about baleen whale and toothed whales, is that baleen whale don't have those very close knit family groups, unlike toothed whales, which will spend all of their lives with their same pod. So they become independent very soon after they're born, just a couple of months. And yeah, another thing is that unlike all of the other mammals, cetaceans, they are not born headfirst. Because why? They are in the water. So for humans, dogs, cats, monkeys, all of these other mammals, we are born headfirst because we need to breathe as soon as we come out. For the whales, it's the other way around. So they are born tail first. We don't have any pictures of gray whales having babies. It's been in the lagoons. They have been very, very, very close to getting the picture, but so far we haven't been able to do that yet. But they are born tail first because as soon as they are born, they don't know how to swim. They are very wobbly, they are very wrinkly, they are not very good in the water. So what will happen is that the mother will go underneath the baby whale for the first few hours of its life and just make sure that the baby whale is coming up to the surface to breathe. So if they were born head first, they wouldn't be able to survive. So basically that's what they do. And yeah, if you look over here, 1 second. All right. So in San Ignacio Lagoon, it's a very special place. As I was saying, it's the smallest of the lagoons, and this allows for very close encounters with the whales. Now, whales are uh, very big animals, and they are a lot more agile in the water than we can be with our boats. So what happens is we go out into the whale watching area, and then we are observing from the boat. Now, some of the whales, they have become very friendly. They are very curious and they will approach the boats and get very, very close. They will scratch themselves on the bottom of the boat. Sometimes they will go around and push the boat. And they can be very, very curious about the boats in the lagoon. Now, like anything in life, some of them are curious and some of them are not. But it's incredible because once you are in the lagoon, you just see so many whales all over the place. It's a very, very magical experience, and it can only happen if the whale is interested or is curious about you. So yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything you would like to know about the whales, about taxonomy, about the experience that we have in San Ignacio. Whatever you would like to ask, I would be happy to answer.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have questions, you can submit them via the question field in your control panel on the upper right corner. All right, let's get to some of these questions. So, do we know why the whales that don't have teeth have two blowholes?
It's actually the blowhole of the whale is the nose of a mammal. So what happens is, or what happened basically, is that the blowhole of Odontoceti became kind of inner. So if you were to open the skull of, or if you were to look inside the skull of a dolphin, you would see that they also have the separated nose. It just kind of became inside of the skull, not outside like whales or most of the other mammals. So they have the two openings. It's just that you cannot see it from above.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So, is it accurate to say that killer whales are really killer dolphins?
Yes, yes. Whales, especially the orcas, depending on the pod that you are looking at, they have different techniques and different diets that they use. So, for example, we have a group of orcas that spends a lot of their time here in Baja, and we have seen them eating dolphins. We have seen them eating humpbacks. Oh, 1 second. Sorry about that. We have seen them eating lots of different big mammals here in Baja, and if you go up to Alaska, you will see some of them eating salmon. If you go, it depends on where they are. Now, depending on if I have read about this, so what it is said is that when they saw the orcas, they were killing whales. So they were saying whale killer, talking about them. And then eventually what happened is that it became whale killer, whale killer, whale killer, whale killer, whale killer whale. But yeah, they eat whales. They eat baby humpbacks and they eat baby gray whales.
Great, thank you so much. Um, so, is it true that there was a gray whale spotted in the Atlantic in the last couple of years, and is that unusual?
Yes, it is very unusual. So I always like to say whales don't read the books and they decide to explore and they decide to go some other places. So as I was saying before, we have two main groups of the, let me see if I have a map of the gray whales. We have the ones that inhabit the American Pacific and the ones that inhabit the Western Pacific, so in Russia and China. So for the longest time, we thought that they were separate groups and that there was no mixture between these two groups. But a few years ago, with the photo ID, we realized that some of the whales from Baja go all the way to Russia, and some of the whales from Russia come all the way down to Baja. So now we know that they can become quite exploratory. So I think a couple years ago, there was a gray whale that was spotted in the coast of Africa. So what probably happened is that it was one of the juveniles. When they are more explorative, they are not sexually mature yet, so they are kind of going off and just checking the ocean out. It was spotted, I think, 3 times along the coast of Africa and then in Spain as well, and it hasn't been spotted since. So probably we don't know exactly what happened with this whale because it hasn't been spotted after those sightings in Africa. But we do know that they like to explore, and they were once upon a time inhabiting the Atlantic as well. So in theory, they could survive in the Atlantic. It's just that it would take time, and it would need to be a bigger group of animals making their way to the Atlantic and then kind of getting the gist of it. But yeah, they can go different places that we don't expect. Usually, for example, they stay out in the Pacific in Baja, but in the years that the water gets very, very cold, so if we have a Niña year and the water is cold, they will go farther than south. So I have seen them in La Paz, which is very strange. So they do like to explore, and they can go and find greener horizons, I guess.
Great, thank you. So, do female gray whales have a calf every year, and how many calves does one gray whale have over her lifetime?
So this is a very, very interesting question. Gray whales have only one calf at a time. There is a few instances of Siamese whales, but they just found the dead baby. What happens is that when baby whales are born, as I was saying, they don't have a lot of blubber, so the female is giving them milk all of the time that they are here in Baja. Now, here in Baja, there is not that much food, so the mamas are not eating a lot. So for a female to be able to sustain one calf is taking a lot out of her. They lose up to 30-40% of their body mass while they are nursing and taking their babies back up. So for them, it would be anatomically or biologically impossible to sustain more than one calf at a time. That's also another good question. You were saying, so they usually in a good year, let's say, they have baby 1 year, and then they take 1 year to rest, and then they have a baby the next year. Now with photo ID, we have some whales that we see, and we can kind of realize how often they're having a calf. And what we have noticed lately is that they are taking longer intervals between calves. And that is because their feeding areas are being affected by global warming. So as I was saying, they feed on the bottom of on the bottom. They go and grab scoopsfuls of mud and take all of the copepods. So these little copepods, they live out of, or they eat an algae that grows on the bottom of ice. So what happens in the summer is that this ice slowly melts and the algae falls and it feeds all of the copepods. So in a normal year, or before the water was too warm, the ice would kind of go up and go down, and the algae would kind of come down all through the summer because the ice would melt and then become ice again and melt again. So there will be food for the copepods all through the summer. Now, what happens with global warming is that the ice melts all at one time. So that means that the copepods only eat at the beginning of the summer, and then they become skinny or they die. So the whales are getting skinny. So we actually had a very big event of whales that died in 2016. So in 2015, the population was around 26,000 whales, and we lost almost half. It was a massive death event. There were a lot of skinny whales. Many of the females were dying. So last year was actually the first year where the event kind of became stable. So we are hoping to see more whales coming next year, but we will see. We will see what happens.
Great, thank you for that answer. We do appreciate it.
Mhm.
So, one of our guests does note that the word word saurus in Latin means lizard. Do we know how the Basilosaurus got that name despite being a mammal?
Yeah, it was basically a mistake when they found the Basilosaurus fossil at that time. They thought it was a dinosaur, and then eventually they realized it was not a dinosaur; it was a cetacean. But the name kind of stuck, so that's why the Basilosaurus is there with the cetaceans, is because at the time they didn't know they were looking at an archaeocet, which are the early cetaceans.
Gotcha. Good to know. Um, so, is it known how much hunting whales is done these days? Is it illegal, or are there reasons that it is legal?
So in Mexico is illegal, and in the United States, if I am not mistaken, is also illegal. There are some exceptions, I think, up in the Arctic, where the indigenous people are allowed to take a few animals, um, but only like a certain amount. Now, what we know is that it's not illegal in many places in Asia and Russia. So that's why we think that the stock of whales in the Asian Pacific is so depleted. So in this, as I was saying, they are counting between 400 and 500 animals in that population, and then we have here all of the other ones, so 14,000 animals. So there are people killing and hunting whales, but it's mostly on Asia and Russia. And here in this area is only those specific groups or those exceptions of natives that have a certain amount of whales that they can hunt every year.
Great, thank you. So, if I wanted to see an orca, can you recommend a time or a place to go see them? Are there any great trips to see those?
Well, orcas are interesting because they have different customs. So some of them are transient, some of them are residents. So depending on what you want, you might try different places. For example, I know that in Vancouver there is a resident pod, so you can see them there year round, and there are very high chances that you will spot them. For example, here in Baja, in the peninsula of Baja California, we do, when I am not guiding with a NatHab with the whales, I work with scuba diving, and we also go out on safaris, which is just going out to look for different species. And we see orcas every so often. Like I would say, they are spotted maybe once a month. Now the thing with orcas is that they are not like the gray whales. The gray whales will come into one specific place because that's where they are having their babies. It's the protected lagoons. They will be there. With the orcas, they just move around all over the place. So you have to be on the right place at the right time to spot them. In my opinion, Baja is a good one. I would spend a few days out looking for them, especially, for example, in the mobula ray migration, which is in May and June. You have big schools of mobulas that come into the bay to reproduce and to feed. So the orcas here in Baja, the ones they pod here, they really love mobulas. So there are high chances of spotting them there, but we see them year round.
Great, thank you. So, is there a best time for us to come down to Baja and catch the great gray whales?
Yes. So the great whales of Baja, the highest density of population is gonna be the end of February and the beginning of March. So from the 15th of February to the 15th of March, that's when we have the highest amount of whales in the lagoons. Before that, we have whales, but they are just coming in, or the mothers and the calves are still a little bit shy, so we don't see them as close. And then afterwards, lots of the whales, especially the newly pregnant females, they have to go up north because they need to get fat to be able to nurse their baby and to have their baby when they're coming down. So you get lots of mothers and calves. But all of the solo whales, so the females and the juveniles and the males, have already left to go back up to eat because they're hungry. They don't eat that much when they're here in Mexico. So from the 15th of February to the 15th of March, that's the sweet spot.
Gotcha, thank you. And what about swimming with whales or having a scuba excursion? Is that something that's possible with NatHab trips?
In Mexico, we are not allowed to swim with any Mysticeti, so any baleen whale. We are not allowed to get in the water in, or any of the sperm whales. We are also not allowed to get in the water in. With the toothed whales, we can go for it. With these gray whales, the water is quite cold and it's really chilly, so I don't think it would be really, really nice to get in the water there. Another thing is that the lagoons, depending on the tides, they can have very murky water because we have lots of water from the mangrove. So you can get a special permit if you are a scientist, but in our trips, it's just looking at the whales from the boat. Um, and I mean, they come really close up to the boat, so I don't know if you could get a better look if you were in the water.
Great. Thank you for that, Andrea. Well, unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
If you ever make your way down here, I promise you, it's the time of your life. So 100% recommend.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.